Perrigo has been a U.S. business for 125 years, but now it plans to become an Irish company, and a move that could cut its tax liabilities in half. Perrigo is paying $8.6 billion to a biotech firm that will give it a base in Dublin.
New at 6 o'clock. Rick Albin spoke with Allergan's representative in the U.S. House about why he thinks the West Michigan company is moving its headquarters. But first, Henry Erb's talking to experts about Perrigo's controversial move and the downsides that it carries. Henry?
Yeah, at a news conference today, Perrigo talked about the advantages of buying the Irish company in terms of opening foreign markets for future growth, boosting its income with additional drug royalties. It downplayed the tax advantage, but a GVSU finance professor says that's what it's really all about.
So this is what they call a pure tax play. It's being done just to reduce income taxes.
Ireland's corporate income tax rate is 12.5%, less than half what companies pay in the U.S.
We tax corporations more than any other developed economy does. So there's some real incentives for companies to move their tax entity out of the U.S.
Perrigo says everything it's built around Allergan during the last 125 years stays where it is, including the actual corporate headquarters. Nobody moves or loses their job, but on paper, Perrigo becomes an Irish company, and that seems to be enough.
So you don't necessarily have to make it there to gain that tax benefit.
It may be a good tax deal for Perrigo, but shareholders are being leery, according to Grand Valley's Greg Dimkoff. He says Perrigo's stock was down after the news.
So there's more to it than just the tax play. And I think the thing that investors are worried about is that Perrigo makes its money selling generics, off-brand health and beauty aids, and it's acquiring a real pharmaceutical company. And the two, on the surface, don't quite fit.
Perrigo says the purchase diversifies its holdings. Dimkoff says there is often talk about changing U.S. tax law to keep corporations from moving offshore, but nothing happens.
The problem with the tax code is it's an entity all by itself, and it may be too big and complex for Congress to make significant changes in.
Dimkoff says a major rewrite of the federal tax law is a once-in-a-generation thing.
And that's where we bring in 24-hour News 8 political reporter Rick Albin.
Now, Rick, you spoke with the congressman who represents Allegan County on this tax issue. What did he have to say?
Well, he'd like to see a major rewrite of the tax code. We'll get to that in a minute, but Congressman Fred Upton says the tax rate that American companies pay is a serious problem when it comes to global competitiveness. He's long talked about the discrepancy in what the U.S. charges companies in taxes versus what other countries levy. He says it is a big problem, and now it's a big problem that may well have come to roost in his district.
This is one of the reasons why we need tax reform. We have the highest corporate tax rate in the world at 35%. And when you look at other companies that have struggled with it, let's call it what it is, a worldwide recession, and that's what it's been, unemployment, everything else, everywhere. What have countries done? They've lowered that rate, except for the United States. We've got to do the same thing.
Now, Upton says he's hopeful Perrigo's jobs will stay here, and the company says it sounds like they will. Likewise, he is optimistic that bipartisan tax reform, being authored in part by another Michigan House member, Ways and Means Chairman Dave Camp, will deal with the corporate tax and other issues this fall, though getting meaningful tax reform through the House and Senate and signed by the president could be very difficult on the eve of a critical midterm election. And as you heard in Henry's piece, getting real tax reform is a generationally difficult thing to do, and it's more complex now than it ever has been before.
Absolutely.
And at this point, though, hopeful that the jobs will stay here.
Well, and yeah, and that'll be one of the real issues too, because that if that tax problem starts costing significant jobs here at home, then there is some more incentive to do it, but it's still a big lift, a really big lift to change that tax code.